Welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, welcome. We are so excited to have you, and if you're returning, thanks for coming back. I'm excited to see you again. Welcome to my Saturday video where I talk about a conspiracy theory or paranormal stuff or strange history, just anything that I found kind of interesting that week. We are currently on a series of King Henry VIII and his wives. We are on the last wife, so next week we're going to move on to something else. And I did miss last week again, and I got a new camera, and apparently you have to learn how to use it first. So I had a lot of technical difficulties last week trying to get this recorded, and I just couldn't. This is my fourth time recording all of this. So on my bonus video, I do my makeup while I talk about whatever it is that we're talking about. So if that's something you might be interested in, you can go ahead and hit the subscribe button down below, as well as the bell icon so you can be notified when I upload. I do want to give a quick warning that some of the things that we talk about on here can be kind of heavy, so if that's something your mental health cannot handle, just go ahead and click off this video and I will catch you somewhere else, but your mental health will always be so much more important than any YouTube video ever will be. So with all of that being said, let's jump into the video. So like I said, we are talking about King Henry VIII and his 6 wives. Today is the last wife, and it is Catherine Parr. Catherine was most likely born in the autumn of 1512. There is some dispute on where she was born, but it was probably most likely that she was born in London. Catherine was the oldest daughter of Thomas Parr and Maud Green. Catherine had 2 younger siblings, a younger brother named William and a younger sister named Anne. Catherine's father, Thomas, was very favored by the king. He was in very good standing with King Henry. He was even knighted in 1509. Thomas also held several positions of power in the kingdom, and Maud was a educator. And Maud was a lady-in-waiting for Catherine of Aragon, which was King Henry's first wife. The Parrs were wealthy, and they even owned land, but they weren't like top tier. They weren't noble, like nobility. They would have been considered gentry, but they were definitely not poor. Thomas died in 1517, and so Catherine would have been about 6 years old when he passed. So this left Catherine with her mother, and she was very close to her mother. When Thomas died, he died a decently wealthy man, wealthy enough that Maud didn't have to concern herself with getting remarried to be able to support her family. There was enough money left over that she would have been able to support her or just focus on raising her kids and not having to remarry. Maud was very educated, and she decided to pass that education on to her children, not just her son, but also her daughters. Education was something that was very important to Maud, and she wanted to make sure that her children had the same education that she did. So they would have been taught the typical like etiquette and how to dance and how to present themselves in public, but they also would have been taught French and Latin and Italian and how to read and write in English. But not only was Maud interested in her children being very educated, she was also very interested in her children marrying into good families. When Catherine was just 17, she was married off to a man named Edwin Berg, and there is some confusion on who Catherine married. Many people think that Catherine married Edward's father, who would have been significantly older than her, but she married Edward Berg, and he was about 21 years old, so they were really close in age. Not much is known about their marriage, but it is known that they did eventually move away from their family because Catherine's father-in-law was not a very nice man, and so Edward moved Catherine away from him. Edward was also very sickly his entire life, and he died pretty early on into their marriage. So Edward died in 1533, and he died of an unknown illness. But by the time Edward had died, so had Catherine's mother Maud, and so this left Catherine to kind of be able to make her own decisions when it came to her life. This is when Catherine married a man named John Neville. John was quite a bit older than Catherine was, but it seemed like overall they had a really good marriage. But it was during this time that when she was married to John Neville that King Henry VIII had divorced or was trying to divorce Catherine of Aragon and Mary Anne Boleyn. And to do this, if you remember, he had to start basically his own church, the Church of England. And there was a lot of people that did not agree with this move and were not happy with what King Henry was doing. So there was a rebellion that was rising up during this whole time. And it's thought that John Neville was pretty against what King Henry was doing as well. So when the rebellion showed up at Catherine and John's door, they're not entirely sure how much they had to twist his arm to join the rebellion. But it seems like Catherine was more happy about the changes being made in the church, and she wanted to see a more modern thing. But Catherine and her stepchildren were held captive in their home, and John was strongly encouraged to join this rebellion. Catherine did keep her opinions about this rebellion pretty quiet. She didn't really make her opinions known, but it is known that Catherine was a very good stepmother. She loved John's children like they were her own, and it seems like she would have done anything to protect them. So she kept her opinions quiet about this whole thing and just kind of went along for the ride. But John joining this rebellion would have really tarnished not only his reputation with the king, but also Catherine's. So after the rebellion kind of came to an end, John and Catherine decided to move closer to London so that they could kind of smooth things over with the king. William and Anne, Catherine's younger brother and sister, were in positions in the court with King Henry. And so Catherine would have had a little bit of a in with the king. And when they moved closer to be part of the courts, Catherine became very good friends with King Henry's daughter, Mary, that he had with Catherine of Aragon. So with the help of Anne and William and Mary, John and Catherine were able to kind of restore their reputation, and King Henry was able to trust them again. It makes me wonder, like, what was the population of the world in that time? Let me Google it. About 461 million, so not that little bit. But John he became sick during this time, and Catherine decided, she took very good care of him up until he died in 1543. Catherine really seemed to mourn his death. One of her most prized possessions was a Bible that had his name inscribed on that, and she kept that until her own passing several years later. During Catherine's time in the courts, she had met a man named Thomas Seymour. Thomas was described as charming and very good looking, but it didn't seem like he had the best intentions when it came to women. It seemed like he might have been a little bit interested in Catherine because she was left a very wealthy widow when John Neville passed away. Thomas Seymour was the brother of Jane Seymour, which was King Henry's third wife. But Thomas wasn't the only one that was interested in Catherine Parr. King Henry was as well. And it seems like he wanted to make sure that he would win her hand in marriage. So in order to get rid of Thomas, King Henry gave him a promotion and sent him to work in the Netherlands and gave him a significant raise. This would have been something that Thomas Seymour wouldn't have been able to refuse. And this took Thomas out of the race for Catherine's heart. And that's when King Henry decided to propose, and Catherine accepted the proposal. It was only about 6 months after John Neville died that King Henry and Catherine Parr married on July 12th of 1543. There are some people who wonder why Catherine accepted King Henry's marriage proposal, and it was probably because she wanted to see a more modern religion come to England, and she thought maybe she could influence King Henry. But overall, King Henry and Catherine seemed to have a pretty good marriage. They were the same age. They were so instead of trying to find someone half his age, King Henry was settling down with someone who was the same age as him. They had the same kind of education, so they were able to, they were able to have a conversation that I think that it seems like King Henry had a really good time being able to have with her. He enjoyed being able to have conversations with her that were kind of enlightened like that. Not that some of his other wives weren't, it was just that they were intellectually on par with each other. But not only that, Catherine was very beautiful, and King Henry really seemed to enjoy this. He did kind of the same thing with Catherine as he had with Catherine Howard, which was last week or the week before. And I'm starting to think he had a thing for women with the name Catherine, but that could just be me. But he took her around the kingdom for about 6 months, just basically showing her off to everyone, and everyone really loved Catherine Parr. It did not take her long to win over the hearts of the people of England. And King Henry seemed just as thrilled with his new wife because she was very supportive of him and everything that he decided to do, even if it was kind of dumb. Like, he decided to have a last campaign in France, which they still had a lot of tension there, but he decided to have another campaign in France and was completely unsuccessful. The only thing he accomplished with this campaign was he killed a whole bunch of his army, so... But when he came back from this, Catherine congratulated him like a hero, and he did the same thing for her since she had been so supportive. But as time went on, Catherine seemed to become more popular than King Henry, and he did not like this. Catherine was also becoming much more vocal about her desires to see a more modern religion come into the kingdom, and she would even publish basically articles by more modern religious leaders, and she even published a book with really modern ideas behind it. She believed that women should have the same access to education as men did, and I mean, we know women were not very appreciated during these times. And it even got so bad her ideas became so widespread that King Henry's daughter Mary even gave one of the books that she had published to King Henry for a Christmas gift. And this seemed to kind of piss Henry off. And the more Catherine spread this idea of women being educated and having basically more rights, the more upset Henry got. And it was when Henry's archbishop came to him and in a letter accused Catherine of having more modern ideas that King Henry actually signed a warrant for her arrest and was going to allow Catherine to be interviewed or interrogated. But as fate would have it, Catherine would actually receive the warrant before it was supposed to be issued to her. So she was able to find out all of this was happening before it took her by surprise. And at first she was panicked because she knew what had happened to other women that had gone against King Henry, like Anne Boleyn and Catherine Parr. And she knew that if she did not get ahead of this, that he would kill her. So Catherine, being the very intelligent woman that she was, went to King Henry and tried to smooth things over. And she was successful in doing this. But when King Henry asked her, "Why are you going against my word or my rule?" she said, basically, why are you arguing with me so much when it comes to religion and those things? She said, "I wasn't arguing with you. I was just trying to learn from your higher intellect." This seemed to please King Henry, and he was able to move on. Catherine did fall in line after this and kind of kept quiet and was just King Henry's wife, but this would have absolutely saved her life because had she pushed any further, we all know what would have happened to her. Catherine took care of King Henry until he died on January 28th of 1547. Catherine did go into mourning after King Henry died, but he was very gracious to her in his will. He gave her an annual salary of £7,000 a year, which was a significant amount of money. And he also gave her the rights to the royal jewels as long as she was alive. Thomas Seymour soon started pursuing Catherine after King Henry died, and Catherine pursued in kind. She was very excited to try to marry Thomas Seymour. It seemed like they really did have feelings for each other before King Henry kind of meddled in between that. And they married very quickly after King Henry died, and not very many people were happy about this. Several people thought this could be a problem because if Catherine were to have been pregnant, they wouldn't know the paternity of the child. They wouldn't know if King Henry was the dad or if Thomas Seymour was the father for like 9 months after they got married. And Mary was also not very happy about this because she thought this was disrespectful to her father's memory. This would actually end the friendship between Catherine Parr and Mary, and they were never able to bridge this gap. They were never able to make up and become friends again. But Catherine seemed to be happy to be doing what she was doing. She wanted to just go enjoy her time with Thomas, so she married Thomas and didn't really care what anyone else thought. They moved into Thomas's estate and they seemed to live a very happy life, and Catherine became an educator just like her mother had. And early in 1548, Catherine found out that she was pregnant and this was going to be her first child. She and Thomas seemed to be very happy about this and seemed to be living a very happy life, and so this was going to be a really exciting thing. But about halfway into her pregnancy, Catherine found out that Thomas was actually being inappropriate with her previous stepdaughter, Elizabeth, who was Anne Boleyn's daughter. Rumor had it that Thomas would often go into Elizabeth's bedchambers after hours and just be really inappropriate. These seemed to be just rumors until Catherine stumbled upon a scene of Thomas and Elizabeth in an embrace. And this is when Catherine sent Elizabeth away, and many people think that this was to protect Elizabeth. She had been a wonderful stepmother to not only Henry's children, but also John's children, and it didn't seem like Catherine was the type to not protect the children. Many people think that Thomas was also a predator and that this was a predatory relationship that he was trying to have with Elizabeth, and so Catherine probably did this to help her. Catherine went into labor in late August of 1548, and this was a very difficult labor. She was in labor for several days, and it is said that during her labor, she let out all the frustration she was having towards Thomas, and I can only imagine. But eventually she did have a baby girl that she named Mary after her friend Mary and her stepdaughter Mary. And everything seemed fine for a while. But about 6 days after the baby was born, Catherine died due to a high fever. This was something that frequently happened with women who had children during medieval times, and it was probably due to unclean practices during the childbirth. So this left Thomas to be with Mary alone. But Thomas would be executed about a year later because he had been convicted of treason. And so Mary was then sent to live with one of Catherine's friends, but it is believed that Mary did not make it to adulthood either. But that's the story of Catherine Parr. But what do you think about Catherine? Personally, I think Catherine was a feminist that would have made some amazing changes if she hadn't been married to a tyrant. She would have made these changes well before they ever would have been, and I think she was just an amazing woman that can very much be looked up to. But what are your thoughts on this? I would love to know down in the comments, and that pretty much sums up my series on King Henry VIII and his wives. So I hope you enjoyed it. I really enjoyed diving deep into this time and kind of learning the real history and not just the bits and pieces that I had known over the years. So yeah, that's all I have for you today. I hope this finds you so well, and I look forward to seeing you down in the comments. I am sending you so much love, and I will see you next week. Bye.